So I also have a little disclaimer, and that's reindeer herders swear like sailors. So there's some of that language. I am an anthropologist, and I do research with Koryak people in Kamchatka. And in 1998, I had the opportunity to spend a couple of weeks with reindeer herders herding reindeer. And I had several misadventures, but really the greatest one was where I was driving a reindeer sled. I had 2 or 3 times to do that. The first time, Valieri was this young guy who was really helpful and explained a lot of stuff. And he let me drive his 2 deer on a sled. And so Koryak reindeer are hitched in pairs. Northern peoples have them all different ways, but Koryaks like them in pairs. And he said, so, seriously, Alex, as soon as you put that rein between the 2 deer, if you're not on the sled and ready to go, you're fucked. So don't fuck this up. And I'm like, okay. And so I got that. Then the other guy, Dima, was going with me. And he took off down the hill, and I got on the sled, and I was ready to go, put the reins between the deer, and they took off, and it's great. And they're trotting along, and I'm riding the reindeer sled, and this is really great. And my Gore-Tex coat is red, and I'm like Santa Claus in Kamchatka, and this is the best thing. This is why I did a PhD in anthropology, so I could do stuff like this. This is amazing. And then we need to, kind of go around this little hill, and I'm trying to get the deer to go that way, and of course they go the other way. And then I'm trying to get them to go that way more, and then it just kind of turn around and flip the sled over and catch my leg in one bit, and I'm all tangled up in the sled and yelling, "Hey, Dima, help me!" And he's like, "Oh, fucking Americans," and comes back, and that was a quote, and untangles me, and he's like, "Is it broken?" I'm like, "No, it's okay." He's like, "Oh my God," because you were screaming like it was broken, and I'm like, "Well, I just didn't want to get left behind." So then we get back on and continue on our way, and it's another hour or so going to where we're going to stop, and that all went really well. I was like, okay, great. So then a couple days later, Dima again is going to go fishing, and this time another reindeer herder, Volocha, who was kind of in charge of the crew, said, "Well, you can take my 2-year-olds." And 2-year-old deer, which later I realized those were the deer he won a race with. I didn't understand that quite at the time. So I'm like, okay, great. And so they're tied to this bush, and I'm trying to untie them. And of course, it's like, 0 degrees Fahrenheit or so. This is Siberia after all, even in April. And trying to untie them, and then they're like, "Hey, he's untying us." And they zip out that way, and I grab on, and I'm like being dragged across the tundra. And then get them to stop, and Dima helps me. And we finally get the deer hitched to the sled, and he says, "Okay, so we're going to do this where your right deer is going to get tied to the back of my sled, and so that'll be one rein, and you have the other rein, which is for the left deer, and so you'll just follow me." And I'm like, "Oh man, I've already done a solo flight here. Why am I being tied up?" And well, as soon as Dima started going, I understood why I was tied up, because these deer, they wanted to win that race. And so they were trying to pass the sled they were tied to. And we did 2 huge circles around nowhere in particular on the tundra, and then boom, off into the woods. So it's one thing to take a sled through the tundra, because there's really nothing to run into, right? It's like moss and grass and stuff like that. But in the woods, there's all these alder trees and willows and birches and things, and there's a lot of things to miss, which was pretty terrifying. And I was just thankful that I didn't dump the sled over, and I didn't break any bones, reindeer or human, and we made it all there in one piece to the stream that was frozen over. And so we spent about 3 or 4 hours, chipped some holes in the ice, and we were fishing for Galiets in Russian, Arctic char. And we only caught like 3 or 4 fish. It wasn't that many, but they were happy. It's like, okay, that's enough for some fish soup at least, because you do get tired of eating reindeer day in and day out. And on the ride back then, the deer were trying to pass the sled they were tied to again, and I was trying to hold them back. And so it's April, and there's a little bit of the snow is kind of melting, and we're on this dry patch where there's this grass, and we're going across the grass, and Volok's yelling at me. He's like, "Hey, get off the sled!" And they're like, "What?" And then he starts yelling at me after we got to the destination. It's like, "Oh, it's really hard on the deer for you to ride the sled when there's no snow under it." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? These things are amazing. They go forever." So even after that, I still had tons to learn about reindeer herding. Thank you.